The road to Hollow Creek hadn't changed much since Adam last drove it 19 years ago. The same cracked asphalt, the same leaning pine trees, whispering secrets in the wind. Only now, the silence felt heavier, like the town had learned to breathe without him, and it didn't want him back. The engine hummed low as he passed the rusted sign, "Welcome to Hollow Creek, population 3,412. The number hadn't been updated in years. Maybe it never would be. He'd left this place when he was 18, with a backpack full of anger and a secret that still pulsed behind his ribs like an old wound that refused to close. But the call came last night, his mother's voice trembling, smaller than he remembered. "Adam, it's your father. He's not doing well." The words had dragged him back across 2 states, through decades of avoidance, right to the doorstep of everything he tried to bury. The air was colder here, or maybe it was the memory. He parked in front of the old family house, the white paint now peeling, the porch sagging like it carried the weight of too many unspoken things. A wind chime tinkled above the door. It sounded brittle, almost nervous. Inside, the smell hit him first, antiseptic, mixed with the faint sweetness of lilac. His mother had always tried to make illness smell like spring. She appeared from the hallway, thinner, older, but her eyes still sharp. "You came," she said softly, as if she hadn't expected him to. "I said I would, though they both knew promises were never his strong suit." She motioned toward the living room. "He's sleeping. The doctor said it's only a matter of time." Adam nodded but didn't move. His eyes traced the edges of the wallpaper, still the same faded pattern of small blue flowers, the same wall that had once hidden something far darker behind it. His mother's voice broke the quiet. "You shouldn't stay long, Adam. People here, they remember." A pause, heavy, deliberate. "Do they?" he asked. "They always do." He almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because fear always made him want to. Later that night, after the house sank into its familiar silence, Adam stood by his old window, staring at the reflection of Hollow Creek in the lake beyond. The moonlight spread over the water like a scar, silver and thin. That lake had kept a secret for 19 years. But secrets don't stay buried forever, do they? And as the night deepened, something shifted in the water, a ripple too slow, too deliberate to be the wind. He turned away, telling himself it was just the past playing tricks again. But the past doesn't play tricks. The past waits, patiently. And tonight, it had started whispering again. By morning, Hollow Creek was pretending to be alive again. The bakery on Main Street opened at 6. The same woman sweeping the steps, her back bent in the same old rhythm. Children ran past with backpacks too big for their shoulders. But beneath it all, the air still held that low hum, the kind you feel before a storm breaks. Adam walked down the narrow road, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning faces he half remembered. Some nodded, most didn't. He wasn't sure which was worse, being forgotten or being remembered too well. The sheriff's office sat on the corner, the paint new, but the tension inside still smelled of dust and guilt. He hadn't planned to go in, but something, maybe the same instinct that brought him back, pulled him through the door. "Can I help you?" The voice belonged to Joanna Pierce, the town's deputy now, though she'd been just Jo in high school, the girl who always carried a notebook and too many questions. She looked up from her desk, surprise flickering across her face. "Adam Holt," she said, his name like a ghost she hadn't expected to speak out loud again. "Didn't think I'd see you walk through that door."
"I didn't think I'd come back," he replied flat, but his pulse betraying him. Jo leaned back in her chair, studying him. "Heard your dad's not doing well. Sorry about that." "Thanks," Adam murmured. "But I'm guessing that's not the only reason you're here." He hesitated. "Maybe I just wanted to see what's changed." Her mouth curved slightly. "Nothing changes here, Adam. You should know that." A pause. "Especially not the things people don't talk about." Her words landed heavier than she probably meant them to. Adam's gaze drifted to the old corkboard behind her, filled with photos, notes, and faded newspaper clippings. And there it was, a yellowed photo, pinned at the top corner. A girl's face, smiling, 17, Clara Mayfield. His throat tightened. He forced a breath through it. "You still keep that up?" Jo's voice softened, though her eyes didn't. "Some people can't forget. Some don't want to." The words echoed long after he left the office. Back outside, the sky was turning the pale gray of early afternoon. He walked aimlessly, letting his feet guide him toward the lake. The closer he got, the quieter everything became, like the world itself was holding its breath. At the end of the water stood a rusted bench. It had been their spot once, his and Clara's, before everything went wrong. He sat, the cold seeping through his jeans, and stared at his reflection. It looked back at him, distorted, fractured by ripples. He whispered, maybe to himself, maybe to her, "I never meant to leave you there." A sound broke the stillness. Footsteps on gravel. He turned. A man stood a few feet away, taller, broader, but unmistakable. Marcus Lane, his best friend once. "Well, well," Marcus said, his voice thick with something between a sneer and disbelief. "Look who decided to crawl back." Adam managed a thin smile. "Didn't think you'd still be here." "Some of us don't have the luxury of running. Some of us had to live with what you left behind," Marcus replied, his eyes cold. Silence stretched between them, heavy as the lake air. Adam's jaw tensed. "It was an accident, Marcus." "Was it?" "Because accidents don't usually come with blood under the fingernails." Adam froze. His heart pounded once, hard. Marcus laughed, but it was hollow. "Relax, old friend. I'm not here to dig it up. Not yet." He turned to leave, but before he did, he said, almost casually, "You might want to stay away from the lake after dark. Some things don't like being disturbed." The words lingered long after Marcus disappeared down the path. Adam stared at the lake again, and this time he could swear, beneath the silver surface, something moved.
That night, the house seemed to breathe. Each creak of the floorboards felt intentional, as if the old walls were stretching, remembering. Adam sat in the dark living room, the only light coming from the dying embers in the fireplace. The clock ticked. The air smelled of damp wood and something faintly metallic, like old blood that no one had cleaned properly. He tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, the memories did. Clara's laughter, the way her hair caught the summer sun by the lake, and the moment, that last moment, when everything went wrong. He remembered her running, the argument, the fall, the silence that followed. He remembered the sound of the water swallowing her name. And then, nothing. He'd told himself for years that he tried to save her, that it wasn't his fault. But memory is a liar. It edits, it hides, it protects. A soft knock at the door cut through his thoughts. He rose, every step reluctant, and opened it. Joanna stood there, her coat damp from the rain that had started without warning. "I didn't mean to come this late," she said, "but I thought you might want to see this." She handed him an old envelope, yellowed, the edges brittle. It had his name on it, written in familiar handwriting. Clara's handwriting. Adam's breath caught. "Where did you—" Joanna interrupted. "An old woman brought it to the station. Said she found it in her attic while cleaning. Thought it might mean something." He took the envelope, hands trembling slightly. "Did you read it?" he asked. "I didn't," Joanna said, her eyes searching his face. "But I should warn you, sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It just builds a better cage." She turned and left, her footsteps fading into the rain. Adam stood alone, the envelope like a heartbeat in his palm. He sat back down by the fire, staring at it for what felt like hours, before finally opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The ink was faded, the handwriting slanted but unmistakable. "If you're reading this, Adam, it means you came back. I knew you would. You always said you couldn't live with ghosts, but maybe you never learned some ghosts live inside you." He stopped reading. The room felt smaller now, the air thinner. He looked toward the window. The rain had turned to fog, rolling in thick from the lake. Something moved within it, a shadow or maybe just a trick of light. He pressed his fingers against the glass. "Clara?" he whispered before he could stop himself. No answer, but then, faintly, almost lost in the wind, came a sound. A laugh, soft, familiar, and it came from the direction of the lake. The laugh lingered, soft and impossible, like a memory refusing to die. Adam froze, his hand still on the cold glass. Outside, the fog pressed against the window, thick and shifting, like it was alive. For a moment, he thought he saw her, a pale outline standing by the lake, hair moving in the mist. Then, the lightning flashed, and she was gone. He stumbled back, breath sharp, the letters still open in his other hand. He read on. "I didn't fall, Adam. You know that, don't you? You always knew. But you needed to believe it, for both of us. If you're reading this now, maybe you're ready to remember." The words blurred, his vision swam. He dropped the letter onto the table and buried his face in his hands. Remember. He didn't want to remember. But the mind doesn't ask permission. It just opens the doors you tried to keep locked. The sound of the lake, summer air thick with humidity and arguments. Clara standing at the edge of the dock, her voice trembling, saying, "You can't keep pretending, Adam." He laughed, nervous, defensive, because he didn't know what else to do. Then she'd said something he hadn't expected. "I know what you did to her." Her. The word cracked open something deep inside him, something he'd buried long before Clara ever came. The memory twisted. He remembered shouting, the way her eyes widened. A step back. The wood beneath her feet, slick with rain. And then silence. Water. Darkness, swallowing everything. He screamed her name, but it was too late. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the living room. The fire had gone out. The shadows had grown longer. He looked at the letter again. There was something else,
faint writing on the back, almost invisible in the dim light. He held it closer to the flame of a candle. It read, "She's still there, under the dock, waiting." The candle flickered violently, as if the air itself reacted to the words. And then came another sound, a creak, slow, deliberate, from upstairs. He wasn't alone. Adam rose, every muscle tight. The floor groaned under his feet as he took the first step toward the staircase. The house felt wrong, too quiet, too aware. Halfway up, he stopped. A faint light was coming from Clara's old room. He hadn't opened that door in over 15 years. His hand trembled as he reached for the knob. He turned it, slowly. The door creaked open, and the music box started playing. That same tune Clara loved, the one she played the night before she died. Soft, sweet, haunting. And sitting on the bed was the box itself, open, turning. Inside it, the tiny ballerina spun slowly, her porcelain face cracked, one eye missing. He stepped closer, heart hammering. Then he saw something behind the box. Another envelope. This one, newer, clean. His name written again, but this time, the ink was fresh.
The envelope felt warm. It didn't make sense. It had just been lying there, untouched for years. But when Adam picked it up, the paper seemed to pulse, faintly, like something alive beneath his fingers. His breath came shallow. He turned it over, half expecting it to be blank. It wasn't. Across the back, written in the same careful handwriting, "You never buried the truth." A cold wave crawled up his spine. He tore it open. Inside, just a small photograph. Old, faded. It showed the dock, taken from the shore. And there, standing at the edge, was Clara. But it wasn't the photo that made his hands tremble. It was the shadow behind her. A man's shadow. Tall. Close. His shadow. Adam dropped the photo like it burned him. He staggered back, hitting the wall, his chest tight, heartbeat loud in his ears. This isn't real. It can't be. But the house disagreed. The air grew heavy. The floorboards creaked again. Not from the wind, not this time. Footsteps. Above him. Slow, measured. He turned toward the staircase, his body frozen in place. The steps came closer. Then, silence. He waited. Nothing. And then in the reflection of the window, he saw her. Behind him, Clara. Or what was left of her. Her face pale and wet. Hair clinging to her cheeks, eyes wide and dark like the lake at midnight. She didn't move, didn't blink. Just whispered, "You left me there." Adam spun around, but she was gone, vanished into air. He fell to his knees, gasping. The photo lay on the floor again, but now there were wet footprints leading away from it, toward the door. And outside,
The wind began to howl, the same low, broken wail that had haunted him all these years. He stumbled out onto the porch. Rain had started to fall, steady, cold. The dock stretched out in the dark, the lake beyond it calm, too calm. He took a step forward, then another. The boards creaked beneath his feet, echoing in the silence. When he reached the end of the dock, he looked down into the water. Something moved. A ripple, then another. And beneath the surface, a pale hand. Floating upward. He stumbled back, slipping on the wet wood. The world tilted, and in that instant, he heard her voice again, closer now, almost tender. Come back, Adam. It's your turn. Then the water broke, and someone, rose from the lake. You left me there. The figure rose from the lake. At first, Adam thought it was her, Clara, pale, dripping, with eyes that held the calm fury of the water itself. But something was wrong. The face wasn't hers, or maybe it was, warped, twisted by years of longing and grief. It smiled, a cold, impossible smile. Adam's legs refused to move. He wanted to run, to scream, but the lake, the air, the night itself seemed to grip him. Adam. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was hers. It was the letter. It was the shadow behind him in the photo. You left me, and now you belong here. He blinked, and suddenly the dock was endless. The water stretched on forever, dark and silver. The trees bent unnaturally toward him, whispering secrets he had long tried to forget. He saw himself reflected in the water, not as he was, but as he had been, young, afraid, guilty. And beside him, the older Adam, the one standing in the house, the one holding the letters, vanished. Then the reflection smiled, and the water whispered again, "Do you remember?" He couldn't tell if it was a question, a demand, or a promise. The rain fell harder now, blurring the line between lake and sky, reflection and reality. He reached out, and his hand touched nothing. The shadow moved, closer. And as it enveloped him, he realized the past wasn't behind him. It wasn't ahead. It was everywhere. Every scream he had ever heard, every lie he had ever told, every secret the town had ever tried to bury, all of it. And now, Adam was drowning in it. But was it water or memory? Was it Clara or the part of himself he had always tried to forget? He couldn't tell. And the lake kept whispering.
The end? Not really. Because in Hollow Creek, the past never lets you go. It waits. And sometimes it calls you back.